take that one turn away with the head for the activity to occur without being watched. And it was almost that it was listening and picking things out. There seems to be some kind of anomaly with the poltergeist banging. It's like it's in a soundproof room. There's no reverberation or very little reverberation, no bass, and it's almost like it's in a soundproof room. Yeah, I'll go with the old Conservative Party and say next slide, please.
Okay, sounds good.
So what does the word poltergeist mean? You might think that's a bit strange to ask that question, giving a talk to people specifically within the paranormal field, as the word has been part of the paranormal vocabulary now for very many years. But despite being made into a well-known terminology to members of the public by the 1982 horror film, the meaning and the description of the word is still often greatly debated. So the word poltergeist arrived in the English language from Germany in the 1830s. The word poltern, which has multiple variation meanings to the word, but translate to make sound, to knock, to rattle, and to rumble. The word geist, which means ghost and spirit. So the term poltergeist itself translates to various combinations of the above: noisy ghost, rumble ghost, or a loud spirit. Now, the Oxford Dictionary describes the word poltergeist as a noun, a ghost, or other supernatural being supposedly responsible for physical disturbances such as making loud noises and throwing objects about. It's not quite the description that I would use. So this is an opportunity, if you want to put something into the box, what would you describe it as? So although most of the claims of suspected poltergeist activity are said to be something that produces noise or some form of sound, not all of the activity believed to be that of a poltergeist actually makes a noise. I will go through and discuss different types of alleged activity in more detail later. So how often have you heard the word poltergeist or poltergeist activity, poltergeist type activity being used when describing an alleged haunting? Quite often, I expect. So be it in a family home or a very normal house, a building, a business, or a creepy old property oozing the potential for things to go bump in the night. Reports of poltergeist activity have been worldwide since the name's introduction in the 1800s. But reported and recorded cases describe poltergeist type activity having been noted surprisingly a couple of hundred years longer than that. So I don't know if you recognize any of these that are up here. So you have, we can go into these a bit later. Again, pop them into the box if you want to have an interaction here. But some of the best researched and documented paranormal and anomalous cases in the history of British parapsychology are that of poltergeists. Why do you think that is? Well, mainly it's down to their repeatable and their ongoing behaviour. Because of that, it makes the activity easier to study and to log, allowing better case history to be recorded. Some of the famous cases that you may have heard of are the Battersea poltergeist, the Enfield poltergeist, the Black Monk of Pontefract, the South Shields poltergeist, and one that you probably wouldn't actually have heard of very often is the South Shields Pete the Poltergeist in Cardiff. So we'll go into him a little bit more, but that is just some of the few recorded cases within the UK in particular that I wanted to make aware to you. So claims of poltergeist activity occur mainly in domestic homes, but it's not always confined to them. So, for example, I don't know if you've heard of Pete the Poltergeist. It was in Cardiff in a lawnmower repair workshop not in a dwelling building itself. So this was in an outbuilding to somebody's home, and it was a business. And that makes it quite unusual. So while it's believed that ghosts and haunting activities are said to be the result of spirit energy, with poltergeist activity, it is believed within academia circles that it is the result of psychic energy generated, usually unbeknown or subconsciously by a person. They are usually referred to as an agent, and this is also known as recurrent spontaneous psychokinesis, or making it shorter, RSPK. It is believed that stresses can be the cause of and can exacerbate this type of paranormal activity. And these stresses include psychological, emotional, physical, and even hormonal imbalances. The investigator should look closely at the personal and family dynamics within the reporting case clients. It might be a difficult subject to observe, but nonetheless, it shouldn't be avoided. It is important to understand that the people experiencing this type of activity may need to seek help of therapists or counsellors to assist with any root causes, especially within long drawn-out cases. Another possible way for poltergeist activity to occur in a home when it's not through the agent is through what is called and classed as contagion. And that's when a third-party person can take a poltergeist from a third-party property away with them to their own home or to another place. Contagion is identified and labelled as such, inverted commas, when poltergeist-type activity occurs around a person or persons who is not the agent, or persons that do not live at the primary infestation site property of the reported anomalous phenomena, but have either come into contact with or visited someone who lives there. So, being a lead field investigator within our team and a case handler for our Somerset Paranormal Investigators UK, I find that I'm hearing of this potential poltergeist paranormal activity from case clients much more often. An interesting fact is that during the lockdown period, we had a sharp increase in reported phenomena in house cases sent to us to investigate. But was that because people, unusually being at home during the working day, they were experiencing house noises that they weren't used to? Could be. This is also referred to as the new house syndrome. So, for example, if you've just moved into a new property, you're not aware of all the taps and bangs when the heating comes on and the noises that maybe birds make on the roof. So every little noise can be something that puts you at edge. And obviously it can be mistaken for paranormal activity. So this is what we mean by a new house syndrome, so that you're not aware of the noises that are going on in the daytime when you're usually at work. Or were the people in the home experiencing an upsurge of RSPK, with tensions, frustrations, or angers building within the family dynamics and clashing within the home? So in my experience, actually dealing with a poltergeist case does not come along as often as you might think. If you think that there is a possibility that you're dealing with poltergeist type activity, you might be right. What I have personally found during investigating cases is that poltergeist type activity is usually reported as occurring alongside other spirit hauntings in properties, and it can be incredibly disconcerting and confusing to those experiencing it because there's a crossover of similar type activity reported for both. So what came first? Chicken or the egg scenario? Do we have a bog standard haunting from your great aunt Mabel? That's if we go along with the thought process, of course, that ghosts are real. And then the feeling of the unease of this great aunt Mabel, she could produce fear within the people from what they're experiencing. And then this brings the potential of an agent-based poltergeist manifestation, perhaps. But let's be clear about this, however. Just because you experience, or you think you experience, one or more of these activities that I will go into in a minute, it does not mean that there's definitely poltergeist activity occurring. This can only be confirmed or discounted looking alongside all of the logged information and activity data. I specifically look for patterns in all the data. So when studies into this phenomenon are looked at, patterns of activity and the type of activity are common based amongst these cases. Is there anything that we can do to help us to recognise the difference? Yes, but it's not foolproof, and I'm sorry about that. That's not the answer that I'm sure that you were hoping to hear. But we are talking about the paranormal, and it doesn't play by the scientific rules. So, saying that, it's essential that logs of all activities are recorded in full. When our team gets contacted, I get the client to record accurate information. So, if you can see the data logging that I have got within the slide, I've created a very simple spreadsheet that I give to them. They can either write it down if that's their preferred method, or they can put that onto their phone and record everything directly into their phone. Most people nowadays has a phone with them, so they would take that everywhere, and it's very easy within your note area to make a logged report and a data. So the kind of things that I would ask, I mean, I think on that form, I have missed a couple of the spaces out. That's an old form that I've uploaded there. The things that I would ask them to start looking at and including is the day, the date, the time. That's the most important thing that would need to be recorded. What was the type of activity experienced? What was the room that this experience happened in within the property? Who was home during these events? Was there an occasion of increased stress in the home or within a person itself? Were there any arguments occurring between any of the occupants? And this is a really interesting one. Was there weather outside that could be responsible for increasing any activity like a storm? And I don't mean the horror film with the thunder and lightning, because I found myself that paranormal activity tends to go up higher within strong winds, and also of a new moon as well. So these are the things I'd be logging within the data areas myself. Now, once my client starts to give me back the data, I take those in, download them onto my own apparatus at home, like my own laptop, and I start logging and seeing if I can find any patterns. Is there one person always present and others are not? This could potentially help to show any person-centered agent, RSPK, or even fraudulent activity, faking and hoaxing. But that's a different talk entirely. If anybody would like to hear the talk that I gave previously at an ASSAP conference, you can find it within the ASSAP YouTube and BitTube and Rumble areas itself. And it's called exactly what I said. So it's faking and hoaxing. And that might be able to explain in cases the different types of misinformation that's passed to you as a case handler. So what were the types of the recurring activity that's come through on the data? Alongside the log, we would take scientific measurements of the property, such as air pressure, humidity, temperature, and EMF measurements. Now, if you can have a look at the one that's on the screen here, this is from my house. And I very quickly got myself a screen grab of something when I made this about 3 weeks ago, a month ago, I think, for the other talk. And I don't quite know what was going on, but you can see on the bottom right-hand side, if Kristian would like to put his cursor on it, there's a yellow peak on the very bottom. Now, I'm not saying that Martin's responsible for all of the poltergeists and hauntings within the house, but he was a bit stressed that day because he had just been the race manager for a 10K race. So I'm not so sure, is he the centered person that creates any of the activity? But that was a very interesting different kind of reading that I wasn't expecting to get on the screen grab. So we've got all of the EMF, temperature, humidity, air pressure, and EMF measurements. And then we carry out our investigation. We look at any analysing any captured footage that we might have as evidence for proof of intelligent hauntings. So things I mean by intelligent hauntings are if you're asking out questions and you're getting intelligent responses coming back. So if you say, what's your name? And the answer comes back, Caroline, that's classed to be as an intelligent response. If you ask, what's your name? And you get banana, that's not necessarily going to be an intelligent haunting. So intelligent hauntings are not usually attributed to being a poltergeist. So the type of things that we're looking for is EVPs, electronic voice phenomena, DVPs. So let's go back to EVPs, electronic voice phenomena. I'm speaking to the converted here. I know that you guys all understand this type of thing. So anything that you don't hear with your ears and it's recorded on an electronic format, either a camera or onto a voice recorder, that is called and classed as an EVP, an electronic voice phenomena. You then have DVPs, which is direct voice phenomena, and they are also caught electronically if you're lucky, but they're ones that's heard auditory by people in the room. So that's a DVP. You also have disembodied voices, which respond intelligently to questions within the room, but they're not caught within the electronic recording type thing. So as I said before, any type of activity that responds intelligently is not deemed to be a poltergeist. So again, this is where I would normally have some audience participation. Please feel free if you'd like to write your answers in a box. So how many of you have experienced some of these 15 signs yourself that I'm going to go into? They're the ones that's on the screen in front of you. Normally I'd ask you to do a show of hands. Keep your hands raised if you've experienced more than half of these signs. And I'm guessing that not all of you would have attributed the activity to being a poltergeist if you have experienced these. So keep your hands raised if you believe it was a poltergeist. So in the box, if you think that you have had all of these at one point or another and you've experienced poltergeist activity, just give me a little hand in the question box and we can come back to that at the end and have a look. So as you can see by these signs, they do have a crossover between spirit, ghost, haunting type activity and poltergeist activity. Let's discuss the signs that could point to the fact that you might be dealing with a poltergeist. So tapping and rapping. So one of the main signs of poltergeist haunting is tapping and rapping noises. Reports from homeowners have described them as gentle taps and raps on walls or furniture. They tend to be really quick, like little thumps, and these noises can come from anywhere in a room, in a house, at any time of day or night. Some reports state that it's impossible to locate the area of the tapping and rapping as they constantly seem to be moving around the place. As with most signs of poltergeist haunting, the cause of these noises is usually unknown. Some believe that these noises are caused by energy created from the poltergeist through RSPK. I don't know if you've heard of the Andover case in Hampshire in 1974. Teresa and Maria were two sisters involved, reported light tapping sounds on the wall that responded to their whispered questions by means of a code. And the SPR, so the Society of Psychical Research, is a chap called Barry Colvin who dealt with this. And I got this from their report system, and I thought it was something that people wouldn't really know about. So this is 1974. So Barry Colvin explains that the raps seemed to be able to answer specific questions, and it demonstrated a form of responsive communication. We're moving on to knocks and bangs. Also recorded activities associated are explained knocking and banging sounds. These knocks and bangs, again, can be heard anywhere in the home, often increasing in frequency and intensity. The knocks and bangs are usually loud and quite distinct, so they cannot be mistaken for regular house noises. They are long and they are drawn out, unlike taps and raps. Some people describe them as sounding like somebody pounding on a wall with their fists, also sounding like something heavy is being moved around the insides of the walls. They occur out of the blue, yet generally not in response to questions asked by the homeowner. Several well-known poltergeist cases involve reported knocking sounds and often describe them as loud knocking and banging. The Enfield poltergeist case in London in 1977 is one of the most famous, with reports of loud knocking noises, along with other paranormal phenomena. The case was extensively reported and documented by the Daily Mirror and the SPR, the Society of Psychical Research. So over 30 people, I'm not sure if you're aware, over 30 people had personally witnessed the reported events, including intelligent people like police officers and other investigators and journalists. Number 3 on the list, bad smells and odours. Bad smells are another common sign of a poltergeist. These foul odours have been described as the smell of rancid sweat. I shall carry on. Yes, they've often been reported as rotting meat, rancid sweat, even a smell like sulfur in some cases. Though some paranormal experts believe bad smells are the result of some type of spirit manifestation, although there is no scientific evidence to back this up. These smells typically have no logical explanation and can make the atmosphere in the property feel very uneasy. They appear and disappear as quickly as they came, lasting for only a short period of time. The Wivenhoe poltergeist in Colchester in the mid-1990s. During other alleged poltergeist activity that was occurring in the home, a strong, unpleasant smell, similar to tar and oranges, it's been described as, appeared repeatedly in the teenage daughter Alice's bedroom. That's one I don't know if you've heard of. It might be worth having a little bit more of a look as the Wivenhoe poltergeist in Colchester. Number 4, dark shadows. Another sign is the presence of dark shadows in the home. These shadows can appear as a figure, more usually seen in the night, and may move around the room. They're not always visible to all members of the household, and some people claim to have seen them only out of the corner of their eye. Some of these dark shadows may even take on an animalistic property of a dog or a cat-sized kind of thing. And it's often said that it leaves a feeling of dread or fear after seeing them, as though aware that something is watching them, but people can't quite make out what it is. The Black Monk of Pontefract is East Drive, number 30 East Drive, and it was in 1968 that the Pritchard family spent 10 months being bombarded by alleged poltergeist activity, which was described as bizarre and violent events. Reports of seeing dark shadows and a cowled, hooded monk were made. Number 5, apportations and reapportations. Often reported is the sudden apportation of objects. This type of activity usually occurs without warning and involves the sudden appearance of an item. These are usually things that are not known to the homeowner and totally unexpected, such as old coins. And in one case that I've dealt with, a first edition book about the USA Pilgrims appeared. That was a weird one. That was a huge book. He offered it for me to keep, and I declined because I didn't want Contagion and bring it home to my house. So I left the chap with this Pilgrim first edition book. Also reported are disappearances of items, usually from a specific location or area in the home. These objects can then reappear in other parts of the house, even if it's in an area that's not used or locked. Or in some cases, the item just never returns. This is also called disappearing object phenomena, or DOP. So I've so far been giving you a little clip of important paranormal cases that's occurred. So for the apportations and the reapportations of objects, and in this case, DOP, I'm going to tell you my own story. So Martin, my husband, is a long distance runner and he has sports watches to help for him to navigate and to track his energy and the time that he is running, because he has a certain specific time that he has to keep to. At one point, he was due to do a 50-mile run and he had his watch on charge while he was doing his practice and his training. He went to go and find his watch for the race itself, and the watch had disappeared. It wasn't where he plugged it in, and the plug that he had it plugged into was still there, but the watch had disappeared. So, knowing that this race was coming up, he ordered himself another watch off of Amazon, and it arrived in plenty of time within the 2 days that he needed it. So this watch went missing, and it was everything over the side where he plugs his watch in was pulled out. The chairs were pulled out. He pulled them all out. I pulled the bookshelf. Everything that you could think of was looked. We have a lady come in to help clean once every few weeks, and she pulled everything out for us. And still, no watch was found. And I think it must have been about 6 months before this watch turned back up again. And it was very bizarre. It turned up almost where it had gone missing in the first place. And that's kind of ironic, but this is the really, really ironic bit. The day that Martin's old watch turned up, the new one disappeared and it went missing for quite a while. But I think it was about 2 weeks, and then it turned up in a very bizarre place in a part of the house that he wouldn't have put this watch. So was it DOP? We will keep that one in a box of the unexplained for now. Moving objects. So witnesses have reported objects, furniture, kitchen items, and even clothing suddenly move from one spot to another. Does this suggest that poltergeists have some kind of control over physical objects? In some cases, people may even witness this phenomenon firsthand. However, this doesn't usually happen. More often than not, witnesses walk into and find that a room has been disturbed in their absence, such as kitchen cupboards and drawers being opened by no visible hands. Or it can just take that one turn away with the head for the activity to occur without being watched. For the regular viewers here, you probably would have heard me talking about the 2-photon double slit experiment. So for further reading, if you haven't heard me speak about this before, watching this on the internet was where my whole belief system changed. Everything that I understood to be paranormal and haunted, ghosts, all of this kind of stuff, it was thrown completely out, and my whole thinking turned on itself after watching this. So if you get a chance, pop in to the YouTube, the 2-photon double slit experiment. It's a fairly modern quantum mechanics physics demonstration that atoms exhibit a very different behavior whilst being observed and not being observed. So it's hosted by Jim Al-Khalali, and it's where my understanding of the paranormal that I say took much more of a scientific turn. I can explain this in the questions later if people would like me to, but at the moment, I'm going to leave that there because I have talked about that regularly within other talks. If you need more introduction and info on that, we can talk about it in the questions. So number 7, stacking of objects. This is when items have been discovered being stacked, one on top of each other, such as a pocket full of coins that have been emptied onto a bedside table at bedtime and then found to be perfectly stacked piles in the morning. This can also be other items as depicted within those well-known horror films as chairs stacked on top of tables. Several well-known poltergeist cases have reported stacking of objects, including household furniture and other items. The Enfield poltergeist, the Battersea poltergeist, the Great Elmhurst mystery in Massachusetts in the US. I'm going to throw an American one in there for you guys just to go and have another read of that one. There are a few of the cases that have that reported phenomena. Number 8, objects being thrown. So one of the most frightening signs is objects being thrown around. This is often reported as random objects such as lamps, chairs, and other items moving on their own. Personally, in our house, our ghost is very favoured to throwing the winder for the grandfather clock that we have in the hallway. Yeah, that gets thrown around. I think the first time that we noticed that it was thrown, it was with such force that it smashed into the wall and removed plaster because it was that hard. Martin also was walking to get the keys off of the cupboard that's next to the grandfather clock, and I physically watched the winder fly off of the clock itself at him as he just passed. And then we tried the normal investigator paranormal activities where you would try and recreate this 20, 30 times and jumping up and down, running up and down the corridor, although that was not what Martin was doing at the time. Anything to see if we could dislodge this winder that had been there for a month quite happily. And obviously nothing could recreate that. Notable poltergeist cases that have reported objects being thrown are the Enfield poltergeist, Battersea poltergeist, and the less known one of the joiner's workshop in Manchester, where pieces of wood were repeatedly thrown, seemingly to attract attention. Okay, number 9, temperature changes. Feeling temperature changes are also reported phenomena. Although the feeling of cold spots have been reported in many cases of poltergeist activity, there is a lack of substantive evidence to associate this along with seeing dark shadows or witnessing other physical phenomena. Are these temperature changes the body's way of handling certain reactions to sudden and unexpected environmental change? Alone, this is not enough to confirm the presence of a poltergeist. Electronic interference. So this is another sign that you might be dealing with a poltergeist. Electrical appliances such as lights and televisions can start to flicker on and off, seemingly by themselves. This could be accompanied by a sudden drop in power or electric being cut completely. Some people even report hearing strange electronic noises coming from their appliances, like beeping, buzzing, or humming. There have been reports of radios and TVs turning on by themselves or changing channels without anyone touching them. Electronic interference can be a very frightening experience. I think the most famous one that I have managed to find during my research is the Borley Rectory, 1862. It was a location with a long history of reported and claimed paranormal activity. And the house was rented and looked into the paranormal activity between 1900 and 1939. And it also featured reports of electronic interference, like radios turning off and on and voices being heard on untuned radio broadcasts. Voices being heard. So although it's not a specific phenomena only to poltergeist, one of the most frightening signs is the presence of voices being heard and auditory, so that more than one person can hear it as well. Reports of disembodied voices or whispered conversations are common. Types of voices reported are a male, a female, or a child. They can be conversational in nature, with words being garbled, sometimes making it hard to make out what they're saying. I think that's probably the most unsettling thing, is hearing a conversation taking part and not being able to know where this was. Number 12, appearances of water. Oh, no, I'm going to go back to number 11, actually, hearing of voices. So this is a really weird thing that's happened. When I was writing an abridged version of this talk for Haunted magazine over a year ago, I'd been speaking to Andy, one of my editors, and I'd said, "Oh, can I have my talk, my article back? I want to just amend something in there." And he said, yeah, not a problem. And I'd been speaking to him about all this stuff that had recently been happening in the house whilst I was writing the poltergeist activity article. So this one morning, I think it was the day after that I'd given it to Andy and Paul for the Haunted magazine. And Martin was due to go and do a long run. So he had his watch and his alarm go off at 5 o'clock in the morning. 5 o'clock in the morning, the alarm went off. 5:05, I hear a little girl on the landing. And this is unusual because most of our activity is just downstairs, because it used to be a single story house originally. So we hear a little girl upstairs on the landing go, la, la. Martin shoots up in the bed on his elbow and he's looking into the corridor. I'm mimicking. He said, "What on earth was that?" And I said, "Well, I think I know what I heard, but I don't want to prime you. So what did you hear?" And we both heard the same thing, which was a little girl going la, la, la. And I had so many activities that happened off this list around the time when I was talking out the words, speaking to Martin to make sure that it read well and that he had the understanding of it. And it was almost that it was listening and picking things out. Now, please don't think that this is going to happen to bog standard houses and people, but I had been with Martin investigating a very prevalent case with the SPR at the time, up near London area, and it was known to be having poltergeist activity. And we think that we might have got some contagion come back with us. And it just so happened to have visited and did things around the time I was writing this. But obviously, with the experience I've had of poltergeist cases, it's drawn this interest for me to bring this information to the public and share my knowledge. So yeah, even if it's a child that you hear, it doesn't make it any easier to hear at 5 past 5 in the morning singing at you. So appearances of water. This sign is not one of the more frequently reported ones, although it does make a regular appearance in higher end cases. And this is where appearances of water can be seen, anything from small drops to larger patches, which seem to have appeared from nowhere. No water source can generally be found upon inspection. So again, I'm going to give you a little bit of information from a private case. We had a case for a pub on Portland in Dorset. And during one of our investigations, I was repeatedly hearing a dripping noise. And when I was searching for the dripping, I located several small areas of water on the floor. And it was in these areas of the room that had previously lots of footfall that we had walked over, bringing in and setting up all of our equipment. So while we were putting cameras on stands and setting up the recording bits and pieces, we had tracked backwards and forwards over this multiple times. Our shoes would have walked through it and disturbed it if it had been there prior to us on our arrival. And at the end of the investigation, no source for this water could be found. Scratches. They're one of the lesser known signs of poltergeist type haunting, but they can be just as unnerving. People can experience scratches and they've reported feeling pain or itchiness on their skin. And upon checking, visible marks have been left on the skin. So a little bit more information from a scientific point of view is that sometimes if you have high EMF, it can cause scratch kind of type marks on the body. So we do have to look at all this other activity and also all of the environmental issues within the property to make sure that we don't have other things that could be causing the scratches that have been reported. Spontaneous fires. Right, before you all go running for the hills, despite there being reports of spontaneous fires erupting, this phenomena is the least occurring documented activity. Bibles and clothing burning are amongst the most documented happenings of these. The most prominent poltergeist case involving spontaneous fires is the Battersea poltergeist in 1956, which involved multiple incidents of fire breaking out in the Hitchings family home. So that's the 14 reported signs, and this is the 15th one. And it's probably the most important. This is the thing that I find myself would be the yes it is or the no it's not a poltergeist. So it's knowing what you're thinking before you're going to say it. Now this is really quite intriguing, and it's something that our team have experienced working with high-end cases previously, particularly the ones that report poltergeist type activities. It's reported feature and most likely to pinpoint, like I say, if you are dealing with a poltergeist. It's not necessarily something that's reported by the homeowners or the clients that are the centre of this activity, because I don't think that they would put the understanding and the seriousness of having this happen. I don't think that they would be aware of this personally. So during updates or debriefs, have you ever been in an investigation in the premises and you've made notes from the logs, for example, that the activity has stopped in certain areas? For example, oh, the kitchen's been really quiet for the last 3 weeks, or the cutlery in the dining room hasn't moved recently. But before one of us has finished uttering those words from our mouths, the exact activity occurs. My husband's a psychotherapist, and he's explained this, that you have the brain fires off through the neuropathic, and it's point 0.2 of a second, I believe he said, and the point 0.2 of a second from when your brain thinks it to your mouth says it. So it's quite quick, very, very fast. So if you're thinking that this is some RSPK type agent activity that's reading your thoughts, it's going to know what you're going to say before your mouth has mouthed those words and said it. So this is probably the one sign that if we keep saying that hasn't happened for a while and it does, this is where I would be looking to see, is this poltergeist type activity? That time it takes from the brain to go to the mouth is what they call the readiness response. And it's thinking about the brain's going to do it and then doing it. So yeah, it's something that we've dealt with over numerous cases. But when you look at things with all of those 15 signs, it's when you look at the log of evidence of all the activity over the long period of time before you can reach your conclusion of what's happening in the property. It can be a confusing process for the homeowner with multiple activities crossing over between hauntings and poltergeists. So if you're thinking of having somebody in to look into haunted activity within your home, please ensure that you choose a knowledged and experienced investigator to help you to arrive at that conclusion. So I'm happy to discuss Contagion a little bit more during the questions if people want to. So I would like to say thank you for listening to me, and just remember, don't have nightmares.
I don't know, I quite like nightmares occasionally. It kind of connects us, it connects us in with our inner thoughts, because dreams are effectively a combination of our fantasies, thoughts, fears, scenarios, real life, all kind of intermingling with each other. So I often find that when there's a nightmare going on, you can sort of wonder, what is your brain trying to tell you? Just a quick one before. So as you were talking there about cases that involved fires, there's I just about to post it in the chat here. So I can remember there was the series of Sightings, the TV show that of course ran from 91 to 97. There was a particular case on there that was followed up quite often by that investigation team that they had as part of that, and it was called the Heartland Ghost, and they actually did a film about it in 2002 using the footage they obtained during the season. And that was a particular case of a house that had a little girl spirit, as they said, and that would cause the cast members, so the film crew who was going there, as well as the family who lived in that house, to have frequent scratches on them, and particularly burning flowers. Their house caught fire a number of times. And that's a really interesting case to have a look at if it's not one you've seen in regards to fires. I had to quickly Google just that show it and then try and find what that was called, and they followed that up quite repeatedly. There's a number of cases that have followed that up. So if you're interested in fire cases and poltergeist phenomena, the Heartland Ghost is certainly one you should be looking at. But thank you very much for your presentation there. That was interesting. Actually, I wondered where you were going to go with the beyond the reported signs. So thank you for listening. Any questions? I'm going to stop sharing here so you can become full screen. There we are. And I know there was lots of comments and stuff being fired in the background. The poltergeist phenomenon, I think, really captures people's imagination in a different way to ghosts. Ghosts, generally speaking, are places you might be able to go and visit where you might be expecting some kind of activity, or you're interested in the historical story, or interested in gathering accounts at a location that I think is phenomenally interesting to go and do. But poltergeists represent a case that might well be ongoing, particularly for the family who are living in that house or that person who's experiencing phenomena there. And it's a very different experience to those who are experiencing it live, daily, weekly. It stops becoming a fascinating topic and suddenly becomes a dread that you have to live with day after day. And I'm aware of the case you're talking about in London, that over the course of a number of years, those people were experiencing that. And certainly with what happened in Enfield, that was over a long period of time. So those who experience poltergeist phenomena have a very different view on ghosts. And I kind of wonder, what is the long-term psychological implication of those who experience paranormal phenomena that is poltergeist related? And those who go away, how does it affect them through their life? What does does it change their perspective on what the universe is? You know, they didn't have a day-to-day life. They had an invisible entity running around their house, causing all kinds of chaos. What does that do to the mind long term? I don't know if that's ever been studied at all.
I think that obviously it has, especially with SPR and how they handle things, because a lot of the investigators are psychotherapists or psychologists. So they tend to have quite experienced people looking out for the general welfare. We're quite lucky that we've got Martin on our team, who's an experienced psychotherapist. So, you know, we can look out for personal welfare within the people in the home. Funny that you say, where does this go? So every reported poltergeist case that we've had come into us, there's always an element of hoaxing. And because they're having such high-end activity and phenomenal stuff that's happening, they think that if they don't keep that happening on a regular basis, I'm guessing, then we're going to lose interest. But yes, you tend to have some form of element of hoaxing along with all high-end poltergeist activity at some point. So where does it go? It does have a huge impact within the family dynamics, and especially if it's male female. Obviously, they're both of them looking at each other to say, you know, have you caused this? Are you doing this? And you do have to look at the welfare side of a potential being coercive control as well. I've had a case that I went to where a woman was having burns and scratches placed on her arm that she was unaware that the partner was actually doing it when she was asleep.
Oh wow!
So she was waking up in absolute agony, and this was all to terrify her and to make her absolutely dependent on him, that he would not be dumped or got rid of. And the only way that we could encourage this to find out what was going on was to encourage the lady to not allow him to visit in for 2 weeks and to see if the scratches and all the reported activity stopped in that 2 weeks. And it did. And then she was guided by her sister to make the conclusion that the rest of us had already made.
Oh wow, that's pretty powerful, and I'm actually really glad to hear that that case actually has a conclusion. Most ghost cases, shall we say, are kind of open-ended. I can remember when Stephen Volk said to me, he says, you hear these stories and they're just kind of left open-ended. There's no real conclusion. With that one, there's, you know, there's an ending, there's a solution, there's a family who can move on. That lady was able to understand what happened to her and then process the kind of trauma that she must have gone through. And then it's like there's a moment of realization. And I wonder how often that happens of people who are in these cases where they perhaps don't get to that point. In regards to Contagion, one of the questions what I was formulating, I really did write a load of questions down, by the way, as you were talking. So, you know, I've often wondered if the entity, shall we say, or consciousness, whatever that might be in the environment, ghost, whatever that might be, do you think it's because the contagion happens because it realizes or it acknowledges that there's someone, these investigators who are in the environment go, wait a minute, these people might know what's going on. And let me go and follow them. Maybe they're going to talk about it. Maybe I can find out something of what's happening. So is this also the entity being intelligent and wanting to follow people that might actually know about, you know, what is happening to them? Because I've often wondered, is it a kind of time anomaly or a conscious anomaly, something left in the environment somehow? And it's potentially trying to find out what's going on. It doesn't have all its senses because it doesn't have, you know, the faculties of nose and smell and sight and stuff. Maybe it's just realizing it. Wait a minute, if I follow this person, maybe they could give me an answer of what even I am. Do you think that might be playing into it?
Obviously, it's conscious because it interacts with you, but where it's center based from the agent itself, it could just be a simple thought process that the homeowner is thinking about the person and sends the contagion down. But it only tends to happen to people who have visited the property or had contact with the poltergeist activity. I mean, we were having some very strange stuff. So even though I've put that element of in every single haunting poltergeist activity high-end case, there's always some element of hoaxing. There was a hell of a lot of stuff going on in this house that we've got in that box of unexplained, a lot. And in the previous case that I dealt with, the big high-end one in Dorset. So, you know, I wouldn't know why anybody would want to personally to fake stuff. But when you go there and you experience this kind of things that's going on, it has an impact on you because it's stuff that's really weird that you're not used to having in your great Aunt Mabel when she comes to visit. I mean, I've only really smelt that kind of really rotten, rancid sweat smell on 3 occasions, and I've been investigating for years. And one of them was in this case that I was talking to you about. Yeah, so, and you know, the most grounded of people have been there to investigate the SPR and ASSAP, and it's left its mark on everybody that's gone in with questions. The place did burn down in the end, and they have moved the homeowners on to somewhere else. So obviously that experience, as far as I'm aware, has ended for the investigations into the property itself. But yeah, it's a very strange experience to have, and I think, I don't know, I don't think it's sentient thinking in that extent. You know, it's not human, that it's never been alive on Earth, it's never breathed air. It's an energy form that's created from within a person. So this is all stuff that's still anomalous. We don't know the answers to this, and we can only surmise based on research and logging data. Unfortunately, I can't fully answer that question for you.
Well, okay, it's interesting you mentioned sulfur and that smell of decay, and that's actually very replete with people who investigate. Like, say, in the past, people had experiences with devils in the wood or creatures. They also exhibited that kind of smell. Places where there appears to be anomalous phenomena happening and strange accounts. Smells, Augustan smells of, decaying flesh, or, almost sickly sweetness, or a smell of feces or whatever. That's quite common. And I've often wondered, is that the same kind of phenomenon? I was listening to a discussion with, what's his name? The guy who wrote Communion, Whitley Strieber. He was talking on podcast a couple of weeks ago, The Debriefed, and he was talking about, in his time where he's had interactions with, shall we say, entities, he believes that they are alien. The typical grey, of course, quite famous from his book, from the front cover of that book, Communion. He says when they excrete, basically it goes through their skin, through their body, these greys, and that smells like sulfur. And I was like, I wonder if that's the same kind of thing there. And I'm aware that Dr. Mark Fox, of course, he recently had an ASSAP grant, and he is doing an extensive research paper on the smell of sulfur in regards to anomalous phenomena, alien and ghost and haunting, and in terms of folklore as well. That he's going to be writing for Anomaly, and of course presenting here in a future presentation about that sulfur smell. So it'd be really interesting what kind of sources he comes up with that too. So I'm Bill Eyre, you're there, my friend. How you doing? I was wondering if you would like to take over and have a read through these questions. Otherwise, these people are going to get very bored of me.
Okay, let's have a look what there is. Raps, taps, knocks and crashes sounds like my knees when I stand up.
Oh, tell me about it.
Yeah,
I'm getting there.
human glow stick.
Might be one or two people with that experience. He also comments a little more seriously, the old brownies and house goblins in folklore seem to me to be the early representation of poltergeists. Tony Liddell asks, pounding on walls sounding like someone pounding on a wall with their fists. In cases like this, have you tried recording the actual sound of someone pounding on the walls for comparison?
Yes. Now, this is the interesting thing that we found out in the recordings that we have in replicating this. There seems to be some kind of anomaly with the poltergeist banging. It's like it's in a soundproof room. There's no reverberation, or very little reverberation, no bass, and it's almost like it's in a soundproof room.